Greetings all. Well, it's Yacon Harvest season, and right over here behind me I have some beautiful looking sunflowers. The blooms are partway through. That is the indication that your Yacon is probably ready for picking. For those of you who are not familiar with Yacon, it is one of the lost crops of the Incas. Yep, there is a book written on that subject. It's a sunflower from South America. It's been cultivated for food in that area for a long time. It's similar to and related to the Jerusalem artichoke of North America, which is native here, otherwise called a sunchoke sometimes. Well, it's a sunflower. Looks a little different, but kind of similar. It's similar growth habit, although it takes longer to produce a crop of Yacon. It needs a pretty long growing season. We aren't ready to harvest here from an April planting. My crop is usually ready in November, and that's right on schedule. Although it's one of the best and the biggest crops I've seen here yet. Just the other day, I had one of the staff from the hospital dropped by with his wife, and the previous year they'd been by with their son, and I'd given him samples of Yacon, and the son just went nuts. He loved the stuff, and so they came back, and of course they were in the wrong season if they wanted to grow it, because this plant is really planted probably February through about April. And so they showed up during harvest season, so I went in with a shovel and I got them some Yacon for their son to eat, and even I was amazed by the yield. So let's get on down in here and have a look at this stuff, okay? So before I get busy cutting down the stalks and making a mess out of this beautiful planting, let's just have a look at it here. This is pretty much over my head to the top of those sunflowers. Probably 7 feet on some of these. Most of the stalks lean under their weight, and so they don't get up that high. But yeah, I expect on a good crop for this to be a fairly presentable and stately sunflower. So first thing to do here is let's get rid of some of these stalks, okay, so they're not in the way. So I'm gonna cut off everything coming up out of the hill. All right, there we go. Now the stalks make pretty good green manure, so you can use them elsewhere in your compost or as mulch and whatnot. Okay, well now there's a little bit left from the last hill I dug. That's just a tad. So let's get into a fresh one here and see what we can find. Oh yes, Butamus. What you think, Gracie? Huh? That good stuff? Well, Gracie came out to help me. She ain't a lot of help, but she's good company. And you go check it out, see. Yeah, she's got a pretty good eye for vegetables. Definitely a nose for them. She says, yep, smells good. This is good stuff. Where'd you get this? I think I'll rub on it. She likes earth and dirt. She's one of the few cats I ever had that just loves dirt. Yeah, so here we are. This pile is mostly one plant. There was a oh, maybe about 10% of another left there in the ground that I pulled out initially. As you can see, the yield is really large. This plant produces a lot. Well, let's see. What's it usually mean when a cat starts digging a hole? Oh boy, I think we better get the vegetables out of here. Otherwise, I'm not sure. What's she mining for there? I don't think she's trying to take a dump. Nope, she's just digging to get a good sniff. The soil in here is really rather exceptional by Hawaiian standards. I've worked it. It has compost, manure, nutrients, all sorts of things, so crops are beginning to thrive here. Well, I'm going to take all this and bring it to another location where we'll clean it up a little bit, have a look, sort it out, and talk some more in a bit. Okay, here I am in the backyard, nice and warm and toasty back here. First thing to do is we need to separate the edible portions from the planting portions. And so I'm going to trim this stuff here. Alrighty, so this bit right here, it's right at the base of the stalk. Looks kind of like red ginger or maybe reddish Jerusalem artichoke. That's this stuff right down here. It's got little bud eyes on it. There's little green tops there. It's kind of white underneath and maybe turns reddish towards the sunlight. And it's definitely right at the base of the stalk. This is what we use to grow next year's crop. Now, it is possible to also use stem cuttings, but they're not as easy, and this is really the easiest way to go. That chunk right there can probably be broken up into, oh, maybe 5, 6 or more pieces, so you can probably make maybe easily 12 plants out of one when you do this. Okay. So there, I've removed pretty much all the edible stuff. I left the stick on top here as a marker for me. This is harvest season for Yacon. It is not planting time. Now I could take this, put it back out in the garden and let it overwinter, and it will probably sprout and come back up in spring. But by then I'm going to have weeds all over it and a big mess, and it might possibly rot. Okay, and so what I do is I harvest the tubers now, and they're for eating. Actually, they're not really tubers. They're enlarged root storage organs. And then I take this part here, and I'll put this down in some buckets of soil, set it in the nursery, just let it sit there till probably around February. And at that point, active growth will begin. I'll take this out of the pot, I'll break it down, I'll divide it into individual containers, make a bunch of plants out of it, and I will have Yacon plant to sell in the nursery, starting, maybe from February outwards through April or May, perhaps it'll be around. Depends on how long it stays in the nursery without selling. It seems to become more popular every year. All right, so this is what we plant, and the other pile is what we eat, so I'm going to finish that job. Alrighty, well, I got everything all cleaned up over here, and so first, I've got these pots, and I'm going to take the planting portions, and I'm going to insert them in these pots. Basically just, I'm storing them for a while. I'll put a little more soil over the top here before I take them away, but yeah, I'm just putting this stuff up so that it stays fresh and moist. There we go. Well, that pretty much takes care of holding this for now. Again, yacon is used as an annual crop. Now, if it was left in the ground, I suspect this would maintain as a perennial, but there's no way to harvest and get the pieces and all that if you're leaving it out there, and from year to year, these are just, tubers will just rot, okay? Now, right here, you can see I have one where I took a scrub brush to it in the sink. The others I just rinsed off. There is a skin on there a little bit like a white potato. The skin is not the most delicious part. I recommend peeling the tubers, although if you get them just like this, fresh out of the ground, just like a new potato, if you hit them with a scrub brush and water like this, the skin will actually pretty much come right off. Now we have reached the favorite part of the YouTube show for most of my viewers. I'm going to taste test yacon. Now, again, I don't think the skin is all that great, personally. It has a kind of a resinous, like sunflower-like taste, you know? But I'm telling you what, right underneath the skin, woohoo! This stuff's good. I had a lady come by yesterday who's never eaten this, and she was guessing it was probably a starchy vegetable, she says. Wrong. No, not at all. This is absolutely not starchy. Well, at least not in the classic sense, like a potato. All right. Here's the interior. It actually looks a little bit like a radish, or maybe like Asian pear. And if I'm to compare it to anything that I've ever put in my mouth, I think it's a cross between Asian pear and water chestnuts. Oh yeah, sweet, definitely sweet. Probably about as sweet as an Asian pear from a supermarket, not like the ones you could grow in your yard. They're sweeter, but it is sweet. It has a little bit of an earthy taste to it, not very much though. It's almost fruit-like. It crunches like water chestnuts. Texture in the mouth, for me, water chestnut. Pretty much. It's very refreshing. A lot of water. Lots of water. Mild, sweet, juicy. I mean, that pretty much says it all, right? Mild, sweet, juicy. Not a lot of fiber in there. A little bit. Just enough to give it body and crunch. Probably good enough to be good for your system, too. Now, I'm going to have to stop chewing if I want to keep talking, so enough of that. I haven't ever met anybody who tried this vegetable who didn't say, It's almost universally acceptable. That's the truth. Even though it's rare and weird and most of us have never seen it before, you don't mean much. It's very standard human type flavor that most of us would enjoy. Probably cross culture, wouldn't matter. So, now, why this plant is so important in the garden, though, is because it contains some very unusual sweetening chemicals. I am told by people who probably should know that most of the sweet stuff in here is actually a fructoglyceride, which is a sweet and indigestible starch. Now, it doesn't taste starchy. It tastes like sugar. But the body doesn't assimilate it. It pretty much just goes in one end here, and it goes right out the other. Now, there's some fructose in here, which is a slower sugar, and a lot of us, who have sugar uptake problems can deal with fructose. That's why the agave nectar is a big deal, right? Now, there's a little bit of sucrose. It's not very much, but it's just enough sucrose on top of the other two sugars in here, or the sugar and the starch, to make this quite palatable and deliciously sweet. Yeah, but it's not enough to spike your blood sugar. That is the key, because most of the sugar taste that's in here really either metabolizes very slowly or doesn't metabolize, period. And so if you happen to have blood sugar imbalance problems, if you're borderline diabetic, if you're full diabetic, etc., this is a vegetable for you. Yeah, and because it almost like Asian pear or something, it actually crosses over as to being a fruit in the mouth, in the mind. This can become a fruit, even though we dug it out of the ground. I use it as chunks in a fruit salad with bananas, pineapple, papayas, and stuff. It works wonderfully in there. It's really a good additive in a fruit salad. There's no conflict. It's really good cubed up in a green salad. Just, lettuce, carrots, stuff like that. Oil and vinegar on top, and cubes of this. Makes it nice and crunchy, adds a little sweet to it like a carrot does. It's an excellent substitute for a water chestnut. Now, I happen to grow water chestnuts, and I will be doing a video on harvest here pretty soon with those. And I love water chestnuts. But, this one's easier to peel, easier to process. It's a much easier vegetable. I like the water chestnut, but oh, son of a guns, man, they're hard to peel, and they're also kind of dangerous to slice. You gotta be really careful because they'll cut your finger off. This one's not so tough. Real easy to handle it. So it works in a stir fry. It works in raw green salads. It works in fruit salads. Sky's the limit, I guess, as far as what you could do in that regard. I know, there's a classic pea salad recipe that's like peas, red onion. Sometimes they use a little bit of bacon in there if you like bacon, and but always water chestnuts. Well, I substitute Yacon, which will tell you what, is way better than a canned water chestnut. It's yeah, so that it works in a classic pea salad. There's just a lot of ways. So it's not a very limited food in that regard, because on top of it all, those of you who maybe have issues with blood sugar, luckily the green guy doesn't, all right? But I have a son that does. If you have that issue, this stuff is an amazing syrup. Yeah, I mean it looks like a potato, right? Well, I guess, all right, they make sugar out of sugar beets too, right? But that's a sucrose type sugar. This one here, if you take these, peel them, put them into like a rotary rasp juicer, like a power juicer or an Acme, one of those, and juice it out. It juices out real nice. You get a whole lot of liquid out of these. And then take it, put it on the stove and start to cook it. As you cook it, particles of the flesh that were in the juice will begin to rise. I refer to it as a scum comes to the top, and you will use a spoon and skim this as it rises out of the liquid. That skimming, though, actually becomes something on the order of like Yacon butter. It's sweet, it's sticky, it's goopy and thick, and you could actually spread it on bread when it's cool for jam. I have a friend of ours who likes to experiment with foods who had made some apple crisp using this stuff, using the skim from the last batch I cooked down. And it worked out good. It was fine. So even the skim or the scum is good to eat. Anyway, after it stops rising, you end up with just this kind of light brown colored liquid. I cook it down until it reaches a viscosity where it kind of hangs to the spoon a little bit rather than running right off. You don't want it too watery. You could test it with a Brix meter if you want to really, be scientific about it and get an absolute specific on the sugar, but generally the eye of tongue works to figure it out. If it looks thick, it's a syrup. Well, that syrup won't spike blood sugar. It's mild tasting, doesn't have an off flavor, and you can use it to sweeten your coffee, tea, use it in baking a pie or whatever you want to do with the stuff. It's pretty universal. And it was actually only a few years ago. I've been growing this plant for decades, but a few years ago I noted on Amazon, while searching for something, that they must have had 40 vendors selling Yacon syrup. I had no idea. Apparently, it's catching on. Long time ago, I was only one of the weird guys that could grow this stuff, and I got it originally from California rare fruit growers. It was hardly known. People still spell it with a Y or a J. I guess it kind of sounds the same no matter which way you do it. But there's even arguments about that. And even the Latin name has changed recently. I have the old one, and I can't remember the new one, so I'm not going to start with it. Anyway, it's becoming mainstream. This is heading into our country. It was one of the lost crops of the Incas that the Spanish never brought out into Europe, along with, like, they brought the potato and chilies and things like that, tomatoes, cacao, all came out of South and Central America and Mexico years ago, but this one didn't go. It just stayed there. And then it was plant explorers probably during the 20th century that actually found it and brought it out. There is a book, as I said, The Lost Crops of the Incas, that talks about most of these fruits and vegetables that were left behind. Some of them we know now. Well, there you go, Yacon. Oh, and it is not planting season, and the plant does not grow in the winter. It's a seasonal plant that even in Hawaii does a spring through fall cycle and then goes to sleep for the winter. And so, as I said, I put my starts over here to one side and just to let them rest for a while. I'll get back to them later on in the winter. I'll begin breaking them down, dividing them out, putting them in separate containers, and trying to make as much out of it as possible for propagation. But it is not time to plant. So if you're looking at this and going, oh, I got to plant, oh, I got to have, wait, spring. It is time, though, to eat the tubers or the roots. So if you're interested in Yacon, I got a lot of it here on the island. I can't ship it. I'm not going to try to ship it, blah, 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 blah. So that is off. But if you live here, and especially if you got anybody in the family that has issues with blood sugar, hey, get a hold of me. I got plenty of it. We'll have it. Hang loose, all.